Nobody knew that Oprah Winfrey was about to reveal the most dangerous secret in media history to Donald Trump. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on a rainy Thursday night in October. Trump was in his Mar-a-Lago study, reviewing polling data and planning his next rally, when his secure phone rang with a number he hadn't seen in over a decade. "Donald, it's Oprah. I need to see you immediately. What I'm about to tell you will change everything you think you know about media, politics, and who really controls America." The request was shocking enough on its own. Oprah Winfrey and Donald Trump had been adversaries for years, representing opposite sides of American culture and politics. She was the beloved media queen who could make or break careers with a single endorsement. He was the populist politician who had built his career challenging the very establishment she represented. But something in her voice made Trump agree to the meeting. There was urgency there, fear even, emotions he had never associated with the woman who had built a media empire on positivity and inspiration. 2 hours later, Oprah's black SUV pulled through the security gates of Mar-a-Lago. She walked into Trump's study looking nothing like her public persona. Gone was the warm smile and confident demeanor that had made her America's most trusted media figure. Instead, she looked exhausted, worried, like someone carrying the weight of terrible knowledge. "Oprah," Trump said, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. "I have to admit, this is the last call I expected tonight." "What's so urgent that it couldn't wait until morning?" She sat down, placing a thick manila folder on his desk. "Donald, for the last 30 years I thought I was building a media empire. I thought I was inspiring people, changing lives, making a difference. But I just discovered that I've been nothing more than a puppet in someone else's show." Trump leaned back in his chair, studying her face. Oprah Winfrey didn't do drama for its own sake. If she was here, if she looked this shaken, whatever she had discovered was real and significant. "What are you talking about?" She opened the folder, revealing documents, photographs, and communication logs that made Trump's blood run cold. Every major media decision in America for the past 3 decades has been controlled by a shadow organization. Not just influenced, controlled. They decide what stories get covered, what opinions are acceptable, even who becomes famous, and who gets destroyed. But the shocking part was yet to come. The documents Oprah had brought weren't just theories or speculation. They were internal communications from something called the Narrative Council, a secret organization that included executives from every major media company, tech platform, and entertainment conglomerate in America. The papers showed detailed plans for shaping public opinion, coordinating news coverage, and manipulating cultural trends with surgical precision. "Look at this," Oprah said, pointing to a memo dated just 6 months earlier. "They planned the coverage of your last rally down to the minute. Which networks would cover it live, which would ignore it, what spin each outlet would put on your statements. They even scripted the spontaneous social media reactions." Trump stared at the documents, recognizing stories, controversies, and media narratives that had shaped his political career. According to these papers, none of it had been organic. Every major news cycle, every scandal, every moment of media attention had been carefully orchestrated by people whose names he didn't even recognize. "They've been doing this to everyone," Oprah continued, pulling out more files. "Politicians, celebrities, business leaders, activists. Anyone with significant public influence either works for them willingly or gets destroyed. There's no middle ground." The scope was staggering. The Narrative Council didn't just control news media. They controlled entertainment, social media algorithms, book publishing, music industry promotions, even which movies got made and which got buried. They had created an integrated system for managing American consciousness itself. "Oprah, how did you find this?" Trump asked, still processing the implications. "By accident," she replied, her voice bitter. "I was negotiating a new streaming deal, and my lawyer discovered that every contract I've signed for the past 15 years contained clauses I never agreed to. Clauses that gave unnamed third parties editorial control over my content. When I started investigating, I found this." She showed him communication logs between media executives discussing how to handle the Oprah problem. According to the documents, her authentic connection with audiences had become too powerful, too independent. The Narrative Council had been gradually limiting her influence, steering her toward safer topics, using her credibility to promote their agenda without her knowledge. They've been using me, Donald. Using my reputation, my relationship with the American people, to sell ideas and narratives that I never chose. Every time I endorsed a book, promoted a cause, or interviewed a politician, I was following a script I didn't even know existed. The betrayal in her voice was personal and profound. Oprah Winfrey had built her career on authenticity, on genuine connection with her audience. Discovering that she had been manipulated into manipulating others had shaken her to her core. And this is where everything changed. But the documents revealed something even more disturbing. The Narrative Council wasn't just controlling media. They were preparing for what they called the final phase. According to internal memos, they planned to eliminate independent voices entirely, creating a completely controlled information environment where dissent was impossible. "Look at this timeline," Oprah said, showing Trump a strategic plan that made his stomach turn. "They're planning to use the next election cycle to justify emergency media regulations, claim that misinformation and divisive rhetoric are threats to democracy, then use that justification to shut down any media outlet that doesn't follow their approved narratives." The plan was sophisticated and terrifying. Create enough chaos and division to justify authoritarian responses, then use those responses to eliminate the last vestiges of independent media. Within 5 years, according to their projections, every significant source of information in America would be directly controlled by the Narrative Council. Your rallies, your Truth Social platform, even conservative media outlets, they're all marked for elimination, Oprah continued. But they're not going to ban you outright. They're going to use more subtle methods: coordinated fact-checking, advertiser boycotts, platform algorithm changes, financial pressure, death by 1,000 cuts. Trump had suspected something like this existed, but seeing the proof was different. The coordination was so complete, so systematic, that it explained decades of media behavior that had never quite made sense. Why certain stories got buried while others dominated headlines. Why some politicians got favorable coverage while others were savaged for identical actions. "Why are you showing me this?" Trump asked. "Why not take it to the FBI or go public yourself?" Oprah's laugh was hollow. "Donald, look at the names on these documents. FBI officials, DOJ lawyers, White House staff from multiple administrations. This isn't some external conspiracy. It's integrated into the system at every level." She showed him more documents proving that government officials had been coordinating with the Narrative Council for years. Intelligence agencies provided them with surveillance data on American citizens. Justice Department officials gave them advance warning of investigations. Even Supreme Court clerks had been feeding them information about pending decisions. "As for going public myself," Oprah continued, "they've already prepared for that possibility. Look at this." She showed him a file labeled Oprah Contingency Plan. It contained fabricated scandals, manufactured controversies, and detailed strategies for destroying her reputation if she ever tried to expose them. Financial irregularities that could be planted in her charitable foundation. Sexual harassment allegations from actors who had already been coached. Even medical records that could be altered to suggest mental health issues. They can destroy anyone, Donald. The only reason I'm still sitting here is because they haven't decided I'm enough of a threat yet. But that's about to change. You haven't even seen the biggest surprise yet. The most disturbing revelation was still to come. The Narrative Council wasn't just an American organization. It was part of a global network that controlled media and information flow in every major democracy. What they had built in the United States was being replicated in Europe, Asia, and beyond. "This is bigger than politics, bigger than media," Oprah explained, showing Trump organizational charts that spanned continents. "They're creating a global system for controlling human consciousness. Not just what people think about specific issues, but how they think, what they value, what they believe is possible." The international coordination was breathtaking in its scope. Media executives in London coordinated with their counterparts in New York to ensure consistent messaging across continents. Social media algorithms were synchronized to promote the same narratives in multiple languages. Even entertainment content was coordinated to reinforce specific cultural values and political perspectives. They've been studying propaganda and social control for decades, Oprah continued, not to prevent it, but to perfect it. They've taken techniques developed by authoritarian regimes and combined them with modern technology to create something unprecedented in human history. The documents showed psychological research into mass persuasion, behavioral modification experiments conducted through social media platforms, and detailed studies of how to break down individual critical thinking and replace it with group conformity. "Look at this," she said, pointing to a research summary that made Trump's skin crawl. "They've been testing methods for inducing what they call manufactured consensus, creating the illusion that everyone agrees with their preferred narrative, making dissent feel not just wrong but impossible. The technique was subtle but powerful. By controlling what information people saw, what opinions were presented as mainstream, and what voices were amplified or silenced, they could make any position seem like universal truth. People who disagreed would feel isolated, crazy, like they were the only ones who saw things differently. They're not just controlling information, Oprah realized. They're controlling reality itself, creating a world where their version of truth is the only version that exists." Wait a second. Don't miss this detail. But the most shocking discovery was personal. Among the documents was a detailed psychological profile of Trump himself, along with strategic plans for managing his political career that went back over a decade. "Donald, they've been manipulating your career longer than you realize," Oprah said, her voice gentle but firm. "Look at this." The file showed how the Narrative Council had deliberately amplified Trump's political rise, not because they supported him, but because they wanted him as a controlled opposition figure. They had calculated that his populist message would create exactly the kind of division and chaos they needed to justify authoritarian responses. "They helped you become president because they knew it would polarize the country," Oprah explained. "Then they used that polarization to justify increased media control, social media censorship, and government surveillance. You weren't their enemy. You were their tool." The revelation hit Trump like a physical blow. Every major moment of his political career, the escalator announcement, the primary victories, even the 2016 election, had been shaped by forces he hadn't recognized. Not rigged against him, but rigged for him, because his success served their larger agenda. "But something went wrong," Oprah continued, showing him more recent documents. "You became too independent, too unpredictable. They expected you to play a role, but you started actually trying to change things. That's when they turned against you." The transition was documented in chilling detail. Internal memos showed the exact moment when the Narrative Council decided Trump had become a liability rather than an asset. They had created a monster they couldn't control, and now they were determined to destroy it. The 2020 election, January 6th, all the investigations and legal challenges, none of it was organic political opposition, Oprah explained. It was a coordinated campaign to remove you from the board before you could expose what they had built. Trump stared at the documents, pieces of a puzzle finally clicking into place. The sudden shift in media coverage, the coordinated attacks from all directions, the seemingly impossible unity among institutions that normally competed with each other. It had all been orchestrated. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. "Because they're about to make their final move," Oprah replied, showing him the most recent communications she had intercepted. "And because you're the only person with enough independent media reach to help me stop them. What you've seen so far is nothing." The Narrative Council's final phase was scheduled to begin immediately after the next election, regardless of who won. They had prepared contingency plans for every possible outcome, each designed to justify the same result: complete media control disguised as necessary reform. "If you win," Oprah explained, "they'll claim the election was stolen through misinformation and foreign interference. They'll use that to justify emergency measures that shut down independent media permanently. If you lose, they'll claim your supporters are dangerous extremists who need to be deplatformed and silenced for public safety. Same result, different justification." The plans were detailed and comprehensive: lists of media outlets to be shut down, social media accounts to be banned, even specific individuals to be prosecuted for spreading disinformation. The Narrative Council had prepared to eliminate every significant source of independent information in America within 6 months of the election. "But there's a third option they haven't prepared for," Oprah said, her voice taking on the commanding tone that had made her a media legend. "What if we expose them first? What if we break their control before they can complete their takeover?" The proposal was audacious. Use their combined media reach to reveal the Narrative Council's existence and operations before they could stop the revelation. Trump's political base, combined with Oprah's cultural influence, could reach virtually every American, bypassing the controlled media systems that the council relied on. "They've made one crucial mistake," Oprah continued. "They've become so focused on controlling traditional media that they've underestimated the power of direct communication. Your rallies, your social media presence, my personal relationships with audiences, we can still reach people without going through their filters." The strategy required perfect coordination and timing. They would need to simultaneously release the evidence through multiple channels, making it impossible for the Narrative Council to suppress the story before it reached critical mass. "But Donald, if we do this, they'll use every weapon they have against us. The manufactured scandals, the coordinated attacks, the legal prosecutions, everything they've been planning will come at once." Trump understood the stakes. This wasn't just about exposing media manipulation. It was about preventing the permanent establishment of authoritarian control over American consciousness. If they failed, if the Narrative Council succeeded in completing their system, independent thought itself might become impossible. "What do you need from me?" he asked. "You won't believe what happened next." The plan they developed over the next 3 hours was unlike anything in media history. Using Trump's upcoming rally in Michigan as the launch point, they would simultaneously release the Narrative Council documents through every channel they could control or influence. "We start with your rally," Oprah explained, laying out the strategy. "You announce that you have proof of the biggest media conspiracy in American history. That gets everyone's attention and forces the mainstream media to cover the story, even if they try to debunk it. Simultaneously, I'll release the documents through my social media accounts, my book club network, and every personal relationship I've built over 30 years in media. We flood the zone with so much evidence from so many sources that they can't suppress it all." The timing had to be perfect. Trump would make the announcement at his rally, creating immediate national attention. Oprah would release the documents online during the speech, giving people immediate access to the evidence. Then they would coordinate follow-up appearances on every independent media outlet they could access. "The key is speed," Oprah emphasized. "Once we start this, we have maybe 48 hours before they coordinate their response. We need to get the information to as many people as possible before they can shut us down." Trump studied the timeline, recognizing the massive risk they were taking. If the revelation failed to gain traction, if people didn't believe the evidence, or if the Narrative Council successfully discredited them, both of their careers would be over. But if they succeeded, they could break a system of control that had been decades in the making. "There's something else," Oprah said, her voice dropping. "I've been in contact with other people who've discovered pieces of this. Journalists, tech executives, even some government officials who want to break free from the system. If we succeed in exposing the council, others will come forward with additional evidence." The revelation meant they weren't alone. The Narrative Council's control, while extensive, wasn't total. There were still people within the system who maintained their independence, who had been waiting for the right moment to act. "But we only get one chance," Oprah warned. "If we fail, if they successfully discredit us or shut down our ability to communicate, everyone else will be too scared to try. This moment, this opportunity, might not come again." Just when they thought it was over. 3 days later, at a packed rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan, Trump stepped up to the podium knowing that the next few minutes would determine the future of American media. The crowd was electric, energized by rumors that something special was planned, but they had no idea what was coming. "My fellow Americans," Trump began, his voice carrying across the arena and through live streams to millions of viewers. "Tonight I'm going to tell you about the greatest threat to our democracy that you've never heard of. A threat so sophisticated, so comprehensive, that most people don't even know they're being controlled. The crowd fell silent, sensing the gravity in his tone. This wasn't his usual rally speech. This was something different, something unprecedented. For 30 years, a secret organization has been controlling what you see, what you hear, what you think. They decide which stories make the news and which get buried. They determine which opinions are acceptable and which are forbidden. They have turned the free press into a propaganda machine, and they've done it so skillfully that most people never realized it was happening. As Trump spoke, Oprah was simultaneously uploading thousands of documents to her social media accounts, her website, and every platform she could access. The evidence was overwhelming: communication logs, strategic plans, coordination emails, financial records, proof that the Narrative Council existed and had been controlling American media for decades. Tonight, with the help of someone you all know and respect, we're exposing this conspiracy, Trump continued. Oprah Winfrey has risked everything to bring you this evidence because she believes, as I do, that the American people deserve to know the truth. The reaction was immediate and explosive. Social media platforms crashed under the weight of people trying to access the documents. News outlets struggled to respond to a story that challenged their very existence. The Narrative Council's carefully maintained control began to crack under the pressure of exposure. But the real test was just beginning. The voice on the phone was familiar, but within hours of the rally, Trump's phone rang with a call from a number he recognized but hadn't heard from in years. It was a voice from deep within the intelligence community, someone who had access to information that very few people ever saw. "Mr. President," the voice said, "what you and Ms. Winfrey did tonight was either the bravest thing in American political history or the most dangerous. I'm calling to let you know that you've awakened something much bigger than you realize." The caller explained that the Narrative Council was just the American branch of a global organization that had been working for decades to establish what they called managed democracy, systems of government that appeared democratic but were actually controlled by unelected technocratic elites. "You've started something that can't be stopped," the voice continued. "But you need to understand that they're going to fight back with everything they have. And their resources go far beyond media manipulation." The warning was both encouraging and terrifying. They had succeeded in exposing the conspiracy, but they had also declared war on forces with almost unlimited power and resources. Over the following weeks, the battle for American consciousness played out in real time. Traditional media outlets launched coordinated attacks on both Trump and Oprah, claiming the documents were fabricated and the conspiracy was a dangerous delusion. Social media platforms began restricting access to the evidence, claiming it violated their terms of service. But something unexpected happened. Instead of being shut down, the revelation gained momentum. Independent journalists began investigating and confirming details from the documents. Tech workers came forward with additional evidence of algorithmic manipulation. Government officials started admitting to coordination with media companies. Even the strongest man once faced a moment like this. The exposure of the Narrative Council triggered a cascade of revelations that transformed American media forever. Major news networks were forced to admit that they had been following external editorial guidance. Social media companies acknowledged that their algorithms had been designed to promote specific political narratives. Entertainment companies revealed that their content decisions had been influenced by unelected political operatives. But the most significant change was cultural. The American people, having seen proof that their information environment had been manipulated, became more skeptical, more questioning, more independent in their thinking. The manufactured consensus that the Narrative Council had worked so hard to create began to dissolve. "What we did," Oprah said during a joint interview with Trump 6 months later, "wasn't just expose a conspiracy. We reminded people that they have the right to think for themselves, to question what they're told, to demand transparency from the institutions that claim to serve them." Trump nodded in agreement. For too long, a small group of people decided what was true and what was false, what was important and what could be ignored. We gave that power back to the American people, where it belongs. The partnership between Trump and Oprah had shocked political observers, but it had achieved something that neither could have accomplished alone. By combining populist political energy with mainstream cultural influence, They had broken through the information controls that had seemed unbreakable. What would you have done in his place? The revelation had consequences that extended far beyond American politics. Similar media control systems were exposed in other countries, leading to a global movement for media transparency and independence. The techniques used by the Narrative Council were banned in democratic nations. New laws required disclosure of any external influence on news coverage or social media algorithms. Most importantly, the exposure of the conspiracy had restored something that had been gradually disappearing from democratic societies, the belief that ordinary citizens could challenge powerful institutions and win. People who had felt powerless in the face of massive media conglomerates and tech companies realized that their collective voice was still stronger than any system of control. Standing together at a press conference 1 year after their revelation, Trump and Oprah represented something unprecedented in American politics: the successful collaboration between populist and mainstream forces to defend democratic values against technocratic authoritarianism. This wasn't about Republican versus Democrat, Trump explained to the assembled reporters. This was about freedom versus control, about transparency versus manipulation, about trusting the American people versus managing them. Oprah added, "What we learned is that the most dangerous threats to democracy don't always come from foreign enemies or obvious dictators. Sometimes they come from people who claim to be protecting us, who gradually take away our ability to think and choose for ourselves." The questions from reporters focused on the long-term implications of their revelation. How would media operate in a post-Narrative Council world? What safeguards could prevent similar conspiracies from developing? How could democratic societies maintain both free speech and protection from genuine misinformation? The answer isn't more control, Trump said. The answer is more transparency. When people can see how decisions are made, when they have access to multiple sources of information, when they're encouraged to think critically rather than just accept what they're told, democracy works. Everyone thought the truth was revealed, but the real shock was. 2 years after the exposure of the Narrative Council, investigative journalists uncovered evidence that the conspiracy had been even more extensive than originally revealed. The organization hadn't just controlled media. They had been conducting psychological experiments on the American population, testing methods of behavioral modification through targeted information delivery. The additional revelations showed that the Narrative Council had been studying the effectiveness of different propaganda techniques, measuring how quickly they could shift public opinion on specific issues, and developing increasingly sophisticated methods for detecting and neutralizing independent thinking. "We weren't just being manipulated," Oprah said during a follow-up documentary about the discoveries. "We were being studied, like laboratory subjects, in an experiment we never consented to participate in." The psychological research had been conducted without the knowledge or consent of the millions of Americans who had been subjected to it. Social media users had been unknowingly divided into test groups to measure the effectiveness of different persuasion techniques. News consumers had been exposed to slightly different versions of the same stories to test which framings were most effective at influencing opinion. What they built, Trump said, wasn't just a system for controlling information. It was a system for controlling minds, for turning human consciousness itself into something that could be programmed and managed. The revelation led to the largest class action lawsuit in American history, with millions of citizens seeking damages for having been subjected to unauthorized psychological manipulation. More importantly, it resulted in constitutional amendments protecting mental autonomy and requiring informed consent for any form of psychological influence. The partnership between Trump and Oprah had achieved something that neither had imagined when they first met in that Mar-a-Lago study. They had not only exposed a conspiracy, but had catalyzed a fundamental transformation in how democratic societies protected individual freedom in the information age. Their unlikely alliance had proven that when the stakes were high enough, people who disagreed on almost everything could still work together to defend the principles that made disagreement possible in the first place. They had reminded America that democracy wasn't just about voting. It was about maintaining the mental freedom necessary to make informed choices. The most dangerous secret in media history had been revealed not through traditional investigative journalism or government oversight, but through the courage of two people who were willing to risk everything to tell the truth. And in doing so, they had demonstrated that no system of control, no matter how sophisticated, could withstand the power of transparency and the fundamental human desire for freedom.